Hey, welcome everybody to Monday Live here on the app and on the website and on Roku. And glad you could join us. And so we're going to get rolling because we have a great program for you today. You already know who my guest is. I'm assuming you do. My guest today is John Haller. Please welcome John. John, what a treat it is to have you every time you're on with me. It was always good.
It's good to be back.
I miss you. It's been like a month, I think, since you've been on here.
Yeah, time goes by. It's like, well, did anything happen since we talked the last time?
Oh, no, not all. People send me your updates all the time, so it's kind of cool. So I can say, okay, John, I can't wait to do the next program with John. And I've actually had people say, you should have John Haller on your program sometimes. Oh, geez, what an idea.
Yeah.
Hey, so, okay. Let's just wind this thing up and go because, yeah, I think that would be a great way to start. What do you say we start talking about the reality of the financial meltdown, what is really going on, where this is really going? John, you know, I watch a lot of financial different channels pretty much every night. You know, I can't wait to go home tonight. Right after dinner, I'm going to go through these different channels and just watching and listening. It's one of my favorite things to do, but things are not looking good.
Yeah, you know, I watch it a lot too. I've been an attorney for 40 some years. I'm sort of transitioning to retirement now. I left my firm, well, it's almost a year ago now. But for the last 20 years of my career or more, 25 years, I did a lot of commercial banking. So represented banks, usually mid-sized banks, but some big banks for 4 or 5 years. The majority of my work was for Lehman Brothers Bank in the 2008 collapse. They had a bank that came out. So I know a little bit about what's going on. I just have to tell you, I was just down at the bank. PM said, hey, pick me up some cash. And I was sort of like, well, what do you want cash for? I didn't think anybody was taking cash anymore. And she said, well, I gave the guy who cleaned the carpets today. I paid him in cash. And it's interesting. As you know, I'm a pretty serious golfer, or not a seriously good golfer, but serious about golf. And a lot of the golf courses, everyone that I go into now has a big sign, no cash accepted here. And they mean like even when you're out on the course with the drink cart girls, you got to dig into your bag to get a credit card out to get a Coke or soda on the course.
Wow.
And this is, you know, this is I was talking to somebody about it. I'm not so sure that I agree with the meme that it's the coming cashless society, because I think they're going to control everything at the point of sale. You and I may have talked about this in the past, but I went into the bank and I said, I need some cash. And I said, you know, before everything falls apart, I want to get some cash. And the guys go, you think everything's falling apart too? Oh my goodness. You know, this seems like the two tellers in there at this bank branch. And they're like, I think the world's coming to an end and all of this thing. So I think people see it. It's really real. It's happening quickly. I don't think that the things that happened over the weekend, and we would just recap that, the Fed came out with this kind of crazy announcement on Sunday. I'm not sure I understand it completely, about how they're going to do these swaps in sort of a different fashion. And they're doing this because I think that the banks are having liquidity problems. People want to get their cash. I don't know how many people I've talked to said, I'm getting all I have out of the bank. I don't know where I'm going to put it. I'm going to put it in a fireproof safe at home, but I don't trust the banks anymore. And so the banks are going to have a big problem. So I think the report that came out last week said that there are about 185 banks that are having fairly major problems, in addition to the 3 that have already gone down, and First Republic, which seems to be teetering. And what is the Fed going to do? What's the Treasury Department going to do? And right now it looks like they're going to guarantee all of the assets, which essentially means they're going to nationalize everything.
Yeah. So let me ask you about that for a second here. So when Janet Yellen says, we're going to pour $2 trillion into the economy. The first statement after SVB collapse is, or whatever you want to call it, is, well, we're not going to jump in, we're not going to do anything. Next thing you know, we're going to pour $2 trillion into everything, mainly into the banks. And so as I watch the various clips of what they are saying, and read things, John, what it sounds like to me is what they're saying is that if they've determined that a bank is really big and too big to fail, all of your assets will be protected. You don't have to worry about anything. But if your money is in a smaller bank, well, so be it. That's your problem. Hence, what I'm guessing is already happening is, if I'm reading this correctly, people are taking their money out of smaller banks. Some are moving them into the bigger banks because they're promised that their money is going to be protected by the national bank, which is what they want to do. That's how I'm perceiving it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the theories, that we're going to end up with 4, 6, or 8 large banks, which effectively is a nationalizing everything. In fact, I was watching Tucker the other night, and he had a banking guy on, and he said, I think that would be a good idea. That way we have everything in one place. And Tucker was kind of looking at him like, wait a minute, who asked, did anybody interview this guy before you put him on TV here with me? Because he was looking kind of shocked. He goes, well, that's an interesting view that we haven't heard around here, or something like that. But the banks are having liquidity problems. So usually what the banks do is they take their excess money. They used to lend it out, make loans with it, and they had to keep a certain amount back. And what happened, though, was a lot of them just dumped money into treasuries because the treasuries were paying 0%. But now the treasuries are at 5%, which means the value has gone down. So a treasury that you have at 0%, you're getting 30 cents on the dollar. I'm just picking a number out of the air, which means you don't have the assets that you thought you had. And it's just this rolling thing, and it's like a snowball rolling downhill. And I don't know that they can change it. But Ed Dowd was on Steve Bannon's War Room on Saturday and gave about a 9-minute interview. I played it in my update yesterday, most of it, and he just said it's over. I don't know how quickly it goes. He used to be a portfolio manager at BlackRock, and he might have worked for Goldman Sachs too. And he has a great book out on analyzing excess deaths from Charlie Vector. That's out, and he's a numbers guy, and he crunches it, and he's made money. I think he lives in Maui, but he's sitting there, and it's like, this is just coming apart, and it's everywhere. We've heard for months about China having problems with their real estate sector. And what happened in China was that everybody had invested in real estate because real estate's going to go up. They're not making more land. And what they were doing in China, their master plan was they were going to bring everybody in from the rural, poor areas, and they were going to put them into the cities. And they built these cities that were totally empty cities. And well, now they're destroying them. They're tearing down these cities that were built for 2 million people, never had anybody in them, because they just don't think that they have a demographic wall that they fit. They're actually losing population now, so they don't need all these. So it's sort of a rolling thing. Everybody was in real estate. Now real estate is worthless, and what was everyone going to do to get their money? And they're going to have pension problems. We're seeing right now, for example, France is in total meltdown because they raised the retirement age by 2 years. And that's a big deal when your population is aging and you're trying to protect. How are you going to pay pensions? How are we going to pay pensions? We have an aging population. I think Japan lost 1 million people last year in population.
That's not good.
These demographic things are things that have never happened anywhere in the world ever before. So now, one other thing that I haven't seen priced into the commercial banking system yet, when Charlie Vector hit, there was this problem. We anticipated that the banks were going to start foreclosing on everything. And I've done high-end commercial foreclosures for a long, long time. But about 5 or 6 years ago, the banks were having trouble because they were foreclosing on so many properties. The properties were then being sold in foreclosure, but they were being sold at very low prices. Like you might have a property. Well, I'll give you an example. I had a golf course. Guy bought a golf course in 2007 for $7.5 million. When it went through foreclosure in 2014 over in Indiana, the golf course sold for $1.5 million. And the problem was there were too many commercial properties in the market at the same time. And the banks had to mark the value, just like they have to mark to market the value of their treasuries that they're holding. They have to do the same thing with the real estate that they've made loans against. So if you have a loan that you made it for $7.5 million, and now the asset is only worth $1.5 million, you got to come up with $5 million of working capital. So this is what happened at Silicon Valley Bank. They had to go out and raise $2 billion, but nobody wanted to buy stock in their bank because they figured the bank was going down. But what's happened with Charlie, everybody's working from home. Drive around. I'm sure this happens in California. Drive around all these office building places, and is the parking lots as full as they used to be a couple of years ago?
In fact, John,
and the answer is they're not.
Yeah, no, they're not.
And so there's a tremendous, what I would call demand destruction in the commercial real estate market. But ever since Charlie Vector hit, the banks have just been kicking the can down the road. They haven't had to do anything. And so when that is priced into the banking sector, it's going to be really, really bad. And you can only kick the can down the road so far. So they're still trying to kick the can down the road. Other countries are doing it. And here we've had tremendous demand destruction in the commercial real estate market. And when that is priced into the commercial banking system, I don't hear anybody talking about it. I just know that this is what's happened because I play golf with bankers and they're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I do hear guys talking about it, but they're more guys like you. You're not hearing it in the mainstream media or anything like that. So you mentioned California. It's everywhere in California. The vacancies are enormous in these office buildings and industrial complexes, and whether it be here in California, but also read what's going on in New York. And so it is going to happen. There's going to be this collapse in the commercial real estate. John, what's your thoughts on also when you look at brick and mortar real estate for retail? Is because I hear differing reports. Sometimes you'll see these malls that are busy, and you see other malls that are just there's nobody there. Oh, you lost yours. Oh, I lost John's. John can't hear me.
Okay.
Oh, you got.
I got you back.
Did you hear anything I said?
I just got you back in the last second.
So basically, yes, what I see taking place in California is the same thing you're talking about. But I'm curious as to your thoughts on brick and mortar retail, because I hear very similar things with that.
That's right.
So, okay. So now here's something else about Silicon Valley Bank is I've gone through and read their hiring policies, and they were woke. Have you read any of their? I mean, you look at the reasons, the requirements to hire somebody, so they weren't hiring competent people either. And so you start working this out. This is affecting not just banks. This is affecting virtually every big business that's out there and the government. The government won't hire people except for woke policies. They won't hire somebody because they're competent. It's just, are you a boy who thinks you're a girl? Then we'll hire you.
Yeah, I mean, the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion thing has been brought into the bank, and this was one of the worst examples that we've seen. And so this is part of this ESG thing that's been pushed, and I think we talked many months ago about the fact that Saudi Arabia was a big proponent of ESG, and part of what happened, environmental, social, and governments, and it was pushed by the World Economic Forum and the Saudis Financial Innovation Institute. And what this does is it's making everything green. I mean, these green policies are crazy. I follow a guy named Dave Walsh Energy on Getter. And he's talking about, I mean, we have all these, I remember all the windmills near you and the pass there between San Bernardino and Palm Springs.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if they're still using those things, but we have them all here in Northwest Ohio. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of these giant windmills, but they think like the windmills are going to provide power 24/7, and you need something that provides power 24/7, but we're getting rid of our baseload stuff. And part of this is because of policies that the Saudis and the Russians have pushed on us to get our green people to adopt. And what it does is it makes things more valuable that they have, like oil, because we're not drilling for as much oil as we had. And it's kind of an interesting end time scenario, because I think what's going to happen is you're going to see the value of what the Saudis have, the United Arab Emirates have, Russia has, is going to increase in value as these green policies are pushed into these countries in the West. It's like we're doing our own destruction. I think it also has an impact with regard to Israel. We know Israel has a lot of gas. I mean, they have about, I think Russia has 40 times more gas than Israel does, but Israel could supply Europe. They could take what Europe needs and fill in the gap now, because Russia has been cut out of the European market. But we have a guy, this is an interesting thing. We have a guy named Amos Hochstein. He was an energy guy for Middle East during the time of the the first Obama administration, and now that we're into Obama 2.0, the Biden administration, as I like to call it, Hochstein is back, and he came in last year and said, Israel, you cannot build a pipeline. Now, there was a report in one of the Jewish news, I think it was in the Jewish press last week, in an article by a guy named David Israel, where Netanyahu had been going to Germany trying to get funding for the pipeline. And it's interesting that when the Nord Stream got knocked offline, Nord Stream 2 never started. Nord Stream 1 was under maintenance. Then it got blown up, and part of Nord Stream 2 got blown up. So those are probably never coming back online. Lo and behold, the United States had companies to step in and say, hey, wait a minute, we got liquefied natural gas you can buy. It's 4 times higher. Oh, guess what? What's the biggest liquefied natural gas company? Well, it's down in Houston. Guess who used to work for that natural gas company? Amos Hochstein, the guy who told Israel, you can't build a pipeline.
Yeah, imagine
So I just have a feeling that he's got stock in the company that he used to work for.
That whole thing's so
corrupt.
suspicious, John.
Yeah.
I was looking at that earlier going, man, it is so suspicious.
It is.
I'm going to ask you about this also. So there's this report out from the Trilateral Commission that 2023 is year 1 of the New World Order. I
actually found that, I think I got it through an Technocracy News email from our friend Patrick Wood, who we had at our church a few years back. And I've known Patrick for probably 15 years. We've been talking about these things. And so, here's this article. It's in the Nikkei, Nikkei, Asia. And it says, year 2023. Now, they won't tell you who said it, because the Trilateral Commission has privacy rules, but you can talk about what they said, but you can't tell who was the person that said this. But so he, she, or they, or whoever it was that said this at the conference, said 2023 is the first year of the New World Order. And I read that, by the way, yesterday in my update, and immediately my YouTube video gets tagged with this thing about the New World Order as a conspiracy theory. Well, I'm not the one talking about it. It was the Trilateral Commission elites that were talking about it.
Seriously? Wow.
Yeah. Well, there's a Wikipedia tag on my video. First one I ever got It says, how, this New World Order thing is a conspiracy. Well, I wasn't the one who was talking about it. It was the elites who were talking about it. And they talk about it all the time.
It's
At
amazing.
the World Government
That's
Summit
amazing.
in 2021, they had a whole session called, Are You Ready for a New World Order? And the lady who ran the conference, World Government Summit, United Arab Emirates, it's one of these big, it's like the United Arab Emirates version of Davos. And she says, gentlemen, panel members, are you ready for a new world order?
It's constant.
And
it's everywhere. I mean, that's just absurd.
Right.
Bush 1 said it in back in 19 whenever it was.
90 or 91, yeah.
91. I mean, so this, and it was around way before that. I mean, this is just absolutely absurd that here we are. Klaus Schwab comes out with the Great Reset. It's all over. New York Times bestseller. What does the New York Times do? Say there's no such thing as a plan for a Great Reset. They have a book.
Oh, you mean like, yeah.
It's their own, book.
The Time Magazine International cover page says the Great Reset.
Yeah. I mean,
it's just like,
it's absurd. So they're doing it, then they lie to you, tell you we're not. And what's amazing, John, is most people seem to believe this stuff. They may know something's wrong, like the guys you mentioned at your bank. They know something's wrong, but it is amazing how many people they'll just believe, no, the Great Reset really is a conspiracy, or New World, or a conspiracy theory. You guys are just nuts. Y'all wear tinfoil hats. Look, these people are just going hook, line, and sinker right along with the plan.
Well, that's one of the things that I sort of object to in the world today, that you see what's happening. It's clear what's happening. You watch the videos, you watch what they say, you read what they write, and then they gaslight you. They say, well, no. You're crazy. That's not what you can't believe what they're saying.
Totally gaslight. I'm gonna gaslight you now. We weren't gonna talk about it, but we are.
Okay.
It's just a gaslight. So you think Trump's gonna get arrested?
I thought for a while that he's going to get arrested.
I did too.
It will cause disruption. I don't know that the stories coming out right now are not a distraction from the obvious meltdown in the banking system to get people focusing on anything else. I mean, like if you go to Drudge, everything at the top of Drudge is about Trump being arrested.
Yeah. I think all this, I think we
lay down a way before. Yeah, you got to weigh down a ways before they, oh yeah, by the way, there's a banking system issue. I really don't know listen, if I was smart, I'd be doing these videos from my condo in Maui like Ed Dowd is, but I'm not. I'm in Sunbury or Galena, Ohio. So how smart am I? But I do think that somebody contacted me yesterday and I just said, get out of debt. You need to prepare. I don't know what's going to happen. You should have some cash on hand. You should have some groceries in store. I mean, we talked about potential food shortages last year. This year is when they might hit, and they might really hit in 2024. So you got to plan for this. Because we've had tremendous destruction of the ability of to bring out fertilizer in modern seeds. The genetically modified seeds that most farmers use need fertilizer. So their yields probably will be down this year. Mm-hmm. On top of that, Tom, we have these water problems everywhere. I read an article this morning. Pam and I, at one time, we had this idea we might retire to Arizona. And there's a development near Scottsdale. Mm-hmm. In big article this morning, they have no water at all.
Really?
No water. And they have 500 or 600 homes. 500 or 600 homes under construction, and signs put up there saying Rio Verde has. It's interesting. The name of the development is Rio Verde, Green River. And they said there's no water here. They have to bring it in by tanker, but because of shortages, now they're having to go twice as far away. So the price has doubled in the last month. for what they can get. So they take flash showers, flush the toilet occasionally, and eat off paper plates.
It's kind of like California.
And these,
yeah. So
these are homes like $600,000 homes.
Yeah, I get it. I've been living in that dream for about 20 years here in California. So here's what's amazing, John, is there is so much water in California this year. I've honestly, what's that?
I saw that.
Yeah. We've had snow at our house like 5 times this year. We don't get snow. It doesn't stay, but we've had it. It's raining all the time. It's raining right now. It's raining the next 3 days. It's been raining. It's the weirdest thing. And you know what's going to happen? We're going to be in a drought here in about 3 months, and the governor of California is going to tell us, you're all going to die, so we're going to raise your water rights, and you're not allowed to take a shower for a week. That's what they're going to say. So in Arizona, certainly, the weather pattern moves from where we are over to Arizona. We're not far. So I know they've gotten the rain. So what happens to all this water? It's the terrible politicians who do this stuff. There's there's solutions for these things, but I don't think they want to solve them. I think they want to keep us in this perpetual place of catastrophe.
Well, I've seen pictures of roads up around Big Bear, Tahoe, Reno, Nevada. It's like 20-foot high piles of snow on each side of the highway. It's like a tunnel.
Yeah,
I've never seen anything like it.
No, I have a friend up in Big Bear right now. Gave me a book to read on, which I got to get to you. It was pretty interesting. But he's stuck up there in Big Bear right now. So I'm just looking at everything thinking we have these politicians that are really something else. But John, you mentioned with the guys at the bank, it's like people who don't even read their Bible, don't really have any thoughts about the Lord whatsoever. A lot of them are starting to wake up and realize, hey, something's going on. It is hard. I mean, you have to choose to think there's nothing going on. It's like every single day, all day long. I mean, how could somebody not think something is going on? Everything's just gonna go back to the way it was.
Right. Sometimes I look at it too, Tom, and I'm like, the people that are running this really aren't that competent. I mean, they're really I don't know. I don't know if there's some really smart person behind all of this, but I just see a lot of incompetence, at least what appears to me to be incompetence. They make like the wrong decision on everything. There was an interesting exchange last week in a Senate hearing, and Senator Langford from Oklahoma questioned Janet Yellen, and he said, Secretary Yellen, what's going to happen to the community banks in Oklahoma? And she said, well, we will decide at the FDIC level, a supermajority decides who gets help. At the federal level, then a supermajority decides who gets help. And then I weigh in with my opinion on who gets help. And he said, so are my banks going to get help? And she said, well, we don't know that yet. And he says, well, then why should my people assume that the community banks in Oklahoma are going to be okay? They're talking about transferring their money to big banks because we know you'll help them.
Yeah,
they'll be too big to fail.
Yeah.
And she says, well, and she's just sort of like, yeah, we'll decide.
I saw the same conversation. So basically, no, the small banks aren't going to get help. But I think of Romans chapter 1, I think it's verse 22, which really validates everything you just said. Professing to be wise, I'm going to prove them to be fools. Mm-hmm. So it really is incompetence given over to a reprobate mind. They can't even make a decision in their own favor. Let me ask you this before we go to questions.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you about China and Russia. Maybe we can get into that and Saudi Arabia and geopolitical realignment. But real quick, your thoughts on Israel currently with all the protests they have?
Boy, Israel's got a big problem. And I have a different view of the need for judicial reform in Israel. They've effectively from my perspective, they've had a coup. I found a very good explanatory video by an organization called Kohelet Israel or something like that. I played it in my update yesterday. And so the Israeli Supreme Court is really taking a left-leaning bent. They decide what laws are going to be allowed. They've said that the basic laws of Israel are constitution, but we have to interpret things with a reasonableness standard. And then we're also going to decide who gets to serve in the Knesset and in the government. So, for example, the Attorney General, which is, I believe, appointed by the Supreme Court, is now telling Netanyahu, you cannot participate in any discussions about judicial reform. And how is this that a guy who's elected and the head of the government can't participate in discussions about judicial reform? So this, in the Supreme Court also has a sort of effective veto over anybody else being appointed to the Supreme Court. They require that appointees to the Supreme Court have the committee to do this has 9 people, but you have to get 7. 3 of them are people on the Supreme Court. So they vote as a block, and nobody can get on unless they get the approval of these people. And there's a lot of nepotism and ideological, they're going to only bring in more leftists. And then they're going to say, well, and they're even saying that, well, the judicial reform law may be passed. And my prediction here is that the Supreme Court will declare it invalid or unconstitutional because it's not reasonable. And they're going to decide.
Yeah.
And they decide, like, they're going to put in a rule. If you're indicted, you can't run for office. And by the way, a lot of funding for some of these organizations is coming from our government, from these left-wing NGOs that Obama funded with settlements from the financial settlements that came out of the 2008-2009 crash. Billions of dollars went to left-wing NGOs. The money was effectively laundered to them. And so they're pushing their agenda. And so Biden comes out and says, oh, yeah, Russia, you need to be careful about judicial reform. Anthony Blinken, our Secretary of State, the other day was saying, oh, you need to compromise. And so since when do we get to tell a country how they should organize themselves? Well, I guess we do that all the time. But
yeah, we do it all the time. But, keep more and more information is coming out about the Biden regime just really manipulating what's going on over there in Israel. But remember when Obama was president, when the evidence was coming out, there's an election that was coming up, and how the Obama 1.0 was totally involved in trying to turn the election, just like they did with the elections here in this country, all right? Just like that. But they were doing it in Israel way back when Obama was president, trying to affect I think it was 1 or 2 times ago when Netanyahu was prime minister. It was quite some time ago, but it's been going on a long time for our country.
They were funding Netanyahu's opposition because they didn't like Netanyahu.
They were funding money for people to go door to door in Israel.
Right.
It's just crazy.
And trust me, to circle back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, since everything seems to be connected these days, they're going to make the argument that Trump's been indicted and he should not be allowed to run for office. And they're trying to foment, I'll be honest with you, I think they're trying to get disruption from people who support Trump. Build a narrative that you're all just a bunch of extremists that don't respect our institutions.
I think, John, I think they want a physical reaction from in the streets, because when I look at it and think, okay, if the government's going to get control of the people, okay, gives them a great excuse. If there's enough civil unrest and they can point to a particular group that leans right and is conservative, and look how many of them are Christian. I mean, what a great excuse they have to say, hey, these people are terrorists. We just proved it. It's like it's the gaslighting. It's just they just keep doing it, and that's what they do. They've been gaslighting for a long time.
Look, I'm very concerned about what's happened. Now, look, I think there were people on January 6th that did things they shouldn't have done. But I've seen the videos. I'm not a total idiot. I'm not a total, a totally unreasonable person. And I see things that don't look like the worst things since the Civil War. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There were no cops that died that day. That's been a big fat lie that's been told by Biden and all the others. And it's rather shocking. I will tell you that I had someone approach me once and said that he had been approached by the FBI. And I said, did you talk to them? And I said, you need to be careful, because he had been there in Washington on January 6th. But I said, I never went anywhere near the Capitol, but I've not seen him since. And it's been almost 2 years, and I'm concerned about that.
Wow, that is definitely a concern.
So I don't know if anything happened to him, but there are people being held. I mean, one guy, he was in solitary confinement for over 300 days. The thing that sort of bothers me about this, and I understand that this happens, is just the lack of concern that, hey, I'm going to completely ruin your life. I'm going to ruin your marriage. I'm going to ruin your job, your business, everything. And they just do it for political power. And it's both sides that do it, because there are plenty of people on the right, so-called, that we think are Republicans. I had a thing, somebody said, oh, well, Mitt Romney, a Republican Mitt Romney came out, and I think it's not a Republican. Give me a break. He just uses the name to gaslight us. It's very concerning what you see. You see this destruction of the justice system, the weaponization of the justice system. And you see it happening in Israel. There always seems to be this parallel between the United States and Israel. I don't know why that is. I'm just saying this is what I've been observing for some time.
Yep, I do see the parallel there. And the good news is I know that Jerusalem's still going to exist and we know that Jesus is coming back. But man, it is just wild to see things. Okay, I want to go to questions, so get ready to send in your questions, but I want to ask John this while you guys get your questions ready. John, the geopolitical shaping that is taking place. Let's take China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, this is a very interesting thing. And look, there are different views of the end times. I personally do. I don't know that this is the way that works out, but I'm not totally dismissive of the idea of an Islamic antichrist. And I think Saudi Arabia is very important. People want Saudi Arabia to come into the Abraham Accords. There's a lot of things going on in that space. We've talked about that Saudi Arabia has allowed certain ideas out there through its press, like, well, really, Muhammad didn't go to the Temple Mount. It's like they're preparing the world for something else being done there. They talk about this Jordanian option, the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine. And so I think that if there is some sort of peace agreement, in fact, there was news today that Netanyahu has revived off the record talks with the Palestinians about a peace agreement. And I think part of that is it's hard to keep up with everything that's going on. And I just think that you need to watch that space very carefully, because there's a lot of push. I heard you talk last night on your show on your Sunday night about Psalm 83. And I don't know that Psalm 83 is a war. I agree with you on that. But I also think that it sort of maybe tells us about a permanent condition between the surrounding countries and Israel in the end times. And if you look at the countries coming into the Abraham Accords and the countries that they want to bring into the Abraham Accords, there's a pretty good symmetry between the countries identified in Psalm 83 and the Abraham Accords. Now, does that mean that the Abraham Accords is this final 10 kingdom thing? I don't know. We'll watch and see. I'm saying it's one of those things you ought to be paying attention to.
I get the question on Psalm 83 a lot. You know, do I believe it? What do you think is going to happen? How do you think it's going to unfold? And so forth. It is interesting when you look at Psalm 83, and Bill Salas has pointed this out many times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's a good friend of both of ours. And he points out when you have the Ezekiel 38 territories, they're outside of the Psalm 83, and he says it's rather strange that the territories that immediately are adjacent to Israel, none of them are in the Ezekiel 38 battle. However, all of them are in the adjacent territories surrounding the borders of Israel from Psalm 83. And he says it's kind of interesting because you have two different sets of territories that are mentioned. And he brings up an interesting point.
The inner ring and the outer ring.
The inner ring and the outer ring. Very interesting. Okay, here's this question. Let's see. What is the significance of the year 2030 to the globalists?
I don't know why they take 2030, but just go out. And I think I have a Facebook friend, David, who's put together a sort of a mashup of all the different Vision 2030, Sustainable Development Goals 2030, Saudi Vision 2030. And then I found this video on Twitter that Profession done. It's about 4 minutes long. I've played it a couple times called Ukraine 2030. And there's actually a book out there, Ukraine 2030. So I'm not so sure that, I'm trying to understand what everybody's beef is and why everybody's so interested in Ukraine. Because I think Russia, it just doesn't, Russia has sort of a mystical religious connection to it. I get that. And you talk to Ukrainians and they'll tell you, boy, Russia did something to us in 1378, and we're still ticked off about that. It was like 700 years ago, but so they remember things a long time. But I'm not so sure that there isn't a goal of the elites is to destroy Ukraine and rebuild some, a country as a lab test. So here's a country we can do it because, it's a country that has fertile soil. They'll be able to grow a lot of food. They're sort of strategically located. And so we're going to use this as a lab test. So there's a book out there called Ukraine 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. But then there's this video, Ukraine 2030, about how, in 2024, after the war, Ukraine started rebuilding. We're the first country to become completely digital, cashless, and that sort of thing. And it's kind of creepy. And you sit there and think, like, is this what they had planned? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what they have planned.
Well, when you look at it also with Agenda 21, I think if we start there, Agenda 21 is 21st century. It's general. What Agenda 2030 did, it gave a target for when we're going to complete these things by. And why they picked 2030, I don't know, and it may be in this Ukraine thing, but these are some of the smartest people in the world, yet they're absolutely foolish, and I believe they're led by the devil. But still, any businessman or businesswoman knows you have to have a goal. And so you set your goal, and then you start making the plans. How do we achieve this goal? So, okay, we had Agenda 21. Now we've got to target Agenda 2030. How are we going to get there? Hence, you start looking at everything, and that goes back to this article, the Trilateral Commission. Year 1, 2023 of the New World Order.
World Order.
Everything is going that way, whether it be the economy with the direction of CBDCs or pandemics. You start looking at everything, you start going, okay, the constant rhetoric or the narrative that's coming out of places like the UN, World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, all of it is racing toward, okay, we got to have everything done by 2030. So I don't know, maybe it's just they want to have their utopian world, so they set their goal, and so they're making every plan they can to achieve it. And the technology is here to get them racing to that end.
It's interesting too. I mean, because there is this theory floating around Christian circles about 2030. Is that when the millennium begins? And you can make the case for that. I don't like to date set. I don't like to create expectations of people. I think in Bible prophecy, maybe we've done a little bit too much of sort of getting people to believe that, we'll be out of here before things get too bad. And now things are kind of getting pretty bad and we're still here. So, look, the Lord's in control. We need to know that. There's still great hope for the Christian. I mean, can you imagine going through all of this and not having the hope of being with Jesus when we get out of here?
No kidding.
So, it's an idea that I entertain, based on the passage in Hosea chapter 5, verse 15, and then Hosea 6, 1 through 3, that talks about 2 days, 1 day. There was a theory among of people that there would be 6 days of human history and then the millennium. So if you add in the 70th week period before the seventh day, and that starts in 2030, then you get to 2023, which is kind of interesting. But there just seems to be an incredible amount of stuff coming out about 2030. And I don't know, I'm not saying that this is it, this is when it's going to happen. Ray Kurzweil, one of the artificial intelligence singularity guys, Time Magazine did an article with him, a cover article with him back in 2011 called 2045, the year man becomes immortal. And at that time they said, the way things are developing with computers and the technology and that type of thing, we'll reach the singularity to such a state in 2045 that man will effectively become immortal. And so it shows you that there's a religious agenda behind this. But Kurzweil just did an article or an interview in the last couple of weeks, and he said, I think we're going to reach the singularity by 2030.
Yuval Noah Harari would like that.
Yeah. By the way, Yuval Noah Harari has weighed in on the side of being against judicial reform in Israel. There was an article in The Guardian on March 7th about that. So he seems to have his fingers in everything. And I think he makes some interesting observations, if nothing else. But, I would sort of call him the prophet of Davos, or the prophet of the Great Reset, because of a lot of what he says is happening. And he's also giving warnings, like an Old Testament prophet would. Jeremiah would say, if you don't repent, this is going to happen. And he's saying, listen, this is what's coming. We're going to end up with people who have no value to society.
Oh, yeah, he does.
I saw an article, by the way, in the New York Times Sunday on the editorial page. And they were talking about that they were looking at millennials who are now the first millennials are reaching age 40. So they did a survey. I don't know if it was scientific, but what they found was that only 30% of millennials at age 40 are living in what we would call a family unit: father, mother, children. The prior generation, our generation, when we reached 40, the number was about 70 or 75% lived in a family like that. So you're seeing all these things, this tremendous tearing at the fabric of society. The Times of the UK had a big article, and I put a bunch of slides in my update yesterday about Oxfam, OXFAM, in the UK has some kind of internet language guide or language usage guide, about they, them, and all this. And it's radical Marxist socialism. And the thing to remember too, when you see these people talking, that there's a religious behind them. Last week, Ezra Klein, a man of the left, writes in the New York Times about artificial intelligence, and he says, talking about this new GPT-4, ChatGPT, all this stuff that's out, he said, it seems like the coders are summoning demons. And you know what?
Yeah.
It sure seems like it.
Yeah.
Because it seems like there's this huge spiritual aspect to all of these things. I think our friend Brandon Holthouse has talked about that as well.
Yeah, we could talk about CERN and start going that direction. So you see this, that's what it appears. There's several different attempts from different angles to summon the demons. And you got to kind of wonder what's going to happen when you read Revelation chapter 9. You have this trumpet judgment. What is it, the fifth judgment? When you have these demonic creatures that are, they've sprung loose. And you think of, was it in the book of Jude, where you have these demons that are worse than the rest of them that are held for the day of judgment. Well, it's the day of judgment. You know, you start looking at the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 9,
right.
You have the fifth and sixth trumpets, and you see this, summoning demons. This is what these people want. And it's coming. We know it's going to come during the tribulation period, but it is wild to see what is taking place. Can I ask you a couple more questions? Unless you want to comment
I would
on
say
that.
The sort of the sum up that last part was it's starting to get really weird.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And you know what? It's going to get weirder.
I know.
It's going to get weirder. I think these movies and TV programs of the last several years with all these just bizarre creatures have been prepping the people for what's coming.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I thought this, just to go off topic real quick, it was years ago we went to one of the, I had seen it filmed when I was up in Cleveland. They were filming it in Cleveland, Captain America Winter Soldier. So we went to see it when we were out there in California, my in-laws, and went to Ontario. And we came out of there. And, you know, what I noticed in that video really struck me was the transhumanist theme about if you're not quite right, make you into something super. And so that's now this theme and throughout the whole LGBTQ and transgender and all of these things that are happening. And I remember walking out of the movie theater and looking around the parking lot there at Ontario Mills and thinking, I don't think people understand what's coming. Mm-hmm. That was probably 2011, I'm going to guess. It's probably the last movie we ever went to, but
and look where we are.
Yeah,
I mean, and where it's going.
Yeah. So more questions.
It's going rapidly. Okay, could the iron and clay? This is from Allison. Could the iron and clay possibly be referring to tech mixed with people, making former humans no longer human? Wouldn't this make them unsalable, since Jesus is substitutionary death? Is a substitutionary death for people. Unsavable is what I think they meant.
Unsavable, yeah. You know, Tom, I think that's one of those things that I kind of put in my baskets of things that might possibly happen. It could happen that way. I do think that we're seeing very strange things, and MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has out a new technology review where they talk about the 10 things that are coming. And I think number one in the 10 technological innovations that are coming is CRISPR technology to alter the DNA of human beings.
So so I'm in Daniel right now, Daniel chapter 2 this Sunday night.
Right.
And I was thrown out the question regarding Daniel chapter 2 by an email, because I had mentioned this possibility, what you were just saying. And I look at Daniel chapter 2, you know, if I go back, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. I go back over the years, I always took that passage from Daniel chapter 2 with the iron mixed as clay, they're not going, the seed of man, they're not going to mix, as being, you know, a political alignments that weren't going to work out. You're going to have partly strong, partly weak. And the person sent me a commentary to let me know what it was. And that's basically, I said, well, I used to teach that. But honestly, with technology, it has got me thinking, wait a minute, I'm not so sure I was right all those years before, because I'm looking at things now going, my mind is going towards everything that you just said in this.
I think there's a number of people who are considering, I think some of the guys at Prophecy Watchers, if I don't have time to watch every video that's sent to me, and I have some other friends who are throwing out the idea that these tech companies may be part of the 10 kings. They have tremendous amounts of money.
Yeah.
Particularly now, that more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And I continually talk about the server farms that are out here on the northeast side of Columbus, Ohio. And I know they have them down in Dallas and other places. These massive buildings. I mean, buildings as long as the Empire State Building is tall, half a dozen of them for Facebook in what used to be a farm field out near where I play golf occasionally. And all it is to store data, information about us.
Yeah.
So these tech companies are really data companies about us. And then that ties into what Yuval Noah Harari says about he who controls the data will control the world.
Absolutely. I look at it also, I mean, I have a lot of information, read a lot of things. I am convinced that these tech companies are also, they're government ops. I mean, when you start looking at DARPA and you realize how Facebook and these different companies began, you're going, wait a minute. These things DARPA was involved with these things from the beginning. They've had their people in, there's government operatives all over in these places. And when you look at the 10 kings, what are these 10 kings? They're not voted in, but they're extremely powerful. So it just totally, I mean, these things make sense in a way that they didn't make that much sense before.
Yeah. Tom, go back and dig out the executive order, I think it was back in March or May, that the Biden administration put out about development of biotechnology. And the person who was put in charge of that office came from DARPA. I think it's called DARPA H.
Regina Dugan. Is that who you're thinking of?
I think that's right.
Yeah, so it's Regina Dugan. So she started in DARPA in 1996. Monkey talks a lot about her. 2009 to 2012, she was the director of DARPA, $3 billion budget. So DARPA's military projects, and one of the things she is working on was mRNA technology. This is in 2009. Military operations, Myrna technology. I mean, you start following. I mean, Billy Crohn's followed these rabbit holes, but you look at this and you go.
I don't know if it's a rabbit hole, but it's a dark spider web.
Okay, that'd be better. Yeah, that'd be a better description of it. Hey, real quick, everybody. So listen, tomorrow Don Stewart's going to be on with me live, and then so join me right here live on the app and on Roku on the website. I'm opening up my October Israel trip on Tuesday morning. So if you want to go to Israel with me, we had a wait list. We sent out information for everybody on the wait list to register. So that window closes for that. It opens to the world Tuesday morning. So if you want to go to Israel with me in October, I would love it. I think we got about 20 spaces left, and that's it. And then my book is coming up if you want to check that out. So I was asked this question, Pastor Tom, speaking in Israel, why don't you have John Haller with you on your next trip to Israel? This is from Pam Fisher from Arizona. Listen, I tell you what, John Haller with me sometime in Israel, I think that would be a blast. Or me with John. Man, that would be.
I would love to do that.
That would be a lot of fun. So I think we can work something like that out. And I also believe John's going to be joining me at a prophecy conference in Texas. So we'll keep you informed on that one too. So I'm pretty excited about things. So, okay, here's this. Brandon says, it's been an hour, got to go. I hate to go off. Okay, this real quick, it has been an hour. But where's the Ark of the Covenant? I've heard you allude to its location might be known. I guess talking about me, I have different people that give me different theories. You have any thoughts on the Ark of the Covenant? We never got to the red heifer.
I've heard a few theories. You know, Chuck Missler and Bob Kornuk did one, and they thought that at least it was down at the Aksum, the church in Aksum, Ethiopia. I've also heard people and people I know that studied the Temple Mount say they know where it is. It's in a chamber under the Temple Mount, and they'll go get it. And you know, always question that. But when I was in Israel a couple months ago, I took the tunnel tours, the Western tunnel tours, and I'd never done that before. And I would just say, if you go to Israel and you don't do that, you're missing out. What is down there along the Temple Mount is just, it blows your mind, the structures that are down there. This thing that Herod built was just this massive thing. Yeah. And you can go see the arches and the walkways and the mikvahs. And so I'm just telling you, all the stuff that's been excavated along the Temple Mount, what happens if they ever get to look under it or figure out a way to get under it? And you've been there, Tom. I've been there, the City of David and the Pool of Siloam, and what they've excavated, and this processional road that they're going to open up. I think they've got about 100 yards or less to go. I'm just telling you, is what is there, what's being uncovered, is just blows your mind. And I love to go with you to Israel.
It does. We'll work that out. I'll work it out with you. I'm looking forward to it. So I'm looking forward to go in May, and then again in October for all of you. Any of you want to go with me, sign up tomorrow. I recommend if you want to go, you'll be able to on the website or on the app. But John, so I look at this procession road and the pilgrim road, the Pool of Siloam. To me, I mean, we've known the rest of it has been there. That's been known, but they're finally able to excavate it. And I can't help but think this is, to me, one of the most remarkable things when you look back to the days of Jesus and the Jews making their procession from the Pool of Siloam or Shiloach, going up that road, the processional road to the Temple Mount, and thinking, I'm thinking we must, it's just to me, I know you can't look at the Bible and say when the Pool of Siloam is fully unearthed and the pilgrim road is wide open, then Jesus is coming. I know there's not a verse like that, but I look at it and go, this is remarkable. When you think how close we are to everything and you start launching, in my mind, to the millennial kingdom and seeing it and going back 2,000 years now, and you can actually go back right now and check this stuff out and go, do the Western Wall. We're doing the Western Wall, I think, coming up in May and also in October. It's exciting. I wish you were going with me. I've got to work out. I've got to work out one of these.
Pool Siloam in December, and they were talking about doing it, and then within a month they said we've now acquired all that land.
Yeah,
and now they're bringing bulldozers in to dig it down, and a lot of it's uncovered. If you look at, I'm going to do a talk in Canada, and part of it is one of my talks is going to be about Jerusalem, the city of God. When you look at aerial videos from about 100 years ago, 110 years ago, they took some. It was just a field south of the Temple Mount, sort of a rolling field. Now it's a village, but underneath that village is the city of David.
So it's amazing.
It blows your mind. It really does.
It totally does. And it's hard, until somebody's been there and you see it. This is the city. I mean, this is the city of David and everything. It is astounding. And in Psalm 102 talks about the time when Israel will rejoice over their stones again, over their ruins. And folks, it's happening. It is like more and more and more and more. It's so exciting. So yeah, maybe you can join John and myself. So John and I will work it out. So looking very forward to it. John, thanks for joining with me. I know I kept you a little long, as I always keep you a little long. I know it's hamburger night or something like that. So go enjoy your burgers. But I can't wait to have you back. I don't even know when you're scheduled to be back, but looking forward to you.
Anytime, Tom.
Looking very forward to it. All right. God bless you, everybody.
God bless.
See you tomorrow with Don Stewart.